Welcome back, everybody, to Chisme&Shadows, #1 podcasts in future charts. Now, this is your host, Miguel. I appreciate you guys being here. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the most crazy, mysterious disappearances Canada has ever seen. No joke. This tale is ridiculous. On top of that, we're going to be making sure I get a nice, embarrassing story to tell you guys. It's one of the most deepest, most cringe stories of my personal life. I'm also going to make sure we get that advice going for anybody that's a little bit younger than me who is rushing through life trying to win a race. Guys, slow down. Slow down, all right? Talking about WorldTok and what that is because it's not known enough and it's probably the most important thing of the modern century. And make sure you stay tuned. We're going to be getting into the Am I the Asshole section, in which we get a juicy tale of lending money and going off on people. Yeah, you're not going to want to miss this one, so make sure you guys stick around for episode 4. And yeah, let's just dive right into it, right? I'm just going to get started with some advice I've learned throughout my life, going through the end of my teens and into my 20s. And it's still fresh enough in my memory to be able to give you the scoop because, to be honest, once you're past this hump, and it's a little different for everybody, some people might be a 23, 24, 25, 26. It's possible you haven't even seen the hump, but for the most part, once you get over this hump, and there's no way to explain it except just know, it's just the click of the mind. It's the click, like your mindset, your whole perspective changes. It's hard to explain. So what I'm gonna say is you just gotta have a lot of trust. Just have a lot of trust in somebody who's been through it. That at some point you're going to come to a realization and it's going to change your mind in many ways. And having passed that, I'll let you guys into a little secret. You don't want to get here fast. What does that mean? Well, it means I feel like a lot of younger people are racing to get to this idea of being an adult. And it's not everybody. I'm sure there's a lot of you guys that are very, very mature. No, I honestly do think that. But there's some of you that are at the age where you might think you're very mature, and everybody goes through it. Like, I remember in my early 20s, heck, 18-year-old, at 18, I was already feeling it. I already had the feeling of like, wow, I'm an adult. I'm not like these little kids. I'm 18 years old. I could vote. I could buy lotto tickets. I could serve in the army. Here's the thing, though. At the time, you really do feel that way. I totally get it, but from an outside perspective, I could let you guys know that, yeah, sometimes we're way over our heads, and I just gotta say, just slow down a little bit, slow down, take it easy, and really do enjoy the teens because, yeah, there's a lot to look forward to once you start gaining more adult privileges, right? But at the same time, there's so much loss that a lot of us who aren't old but past that stage, or a lot of my friends who happen to be in their late 30s, early 40s, and I'll let you know now that a lot of them are reminiscing on the good times as a teenager, the good times hitting 20, 21 years old. And why is that? Because, like I said, that you lose a lot of things, and at some point everybody's going to transition to, more adult responsibility filled life, right? But don't force it. You'll get there, everybody does. So why purposely shorten that? Enjoy the sweet stuff before you don't have the option to. That's what I'll say. And what are the sweet stuff? A lot of the lack of responsibilities. The adult life is cruel. The adult life is hard. Enjoy the time before you get to that point. Enjoy being able to not do that. And yeah, there's gonna be a lot of you that might not have that ability. Maybe you've started working pretty young to help pay for bills and stuff. And we could definitely get into the what it's like to have to pull more weight at a younger age, but that's not the topic for today. I'm trying to more talk about those of you that have the ability to not have to dive right into adulthood. Maybe you live with your parents, maybe it's another case, but if you have any sort of adult responsibilities taken care of by anybody else, enjoy that time. Really, though, enjoy that time. And I'm not trying to discourage gaining independence because no, it's great. Being independent is great, and you should slowly start to realize that. But there's a way to do it without going all at once. You don't have to, the moment you're able to, move out right away. You don't have to dive right into a job. You don't have to do that. There is a balance. I always tell a couple of my friends who went through similar situations that maybe just start slowly getting more responsible. And to be honest, a lot of this stems, or a lot of this goes back to your parents. Hopefully, your parents are good role models, or hopefully they're able to try to help you out in this way. But otherwise, if that's not the case, then here's what I suggest: you slowly start to incorporate more and more responsibilities yourself. Do that instead, and realize that there is going to be sacrifice by relying usually on other people. For example, I have a buddy who, for the longest time, was might even still be getting taken care of, but was taken care of by his parents. But he also had a lot of rules and restrictions into his 20s, and that was the sacrifice because he didn't have to do much. So obviously, his parents were able to, rightfully so, in my opinion, ask a lot more of him. And I think that's totally fair. But it is a sacrifice, and as long as the sacrifices don't outweigh the the opportunity to really work on yourself in a way is at your own pace, then go for it. And I could definitely dive more into this topic, but let's not just focus in on this because we're not going to get into anything else. And yeah, guys, if you are enjoying this podcast, make sure you like the podcast. It would really help me out. And comment something. Let's try to stay positive, but otherwise, comment any sort of topics you're interested in talking about. I will put them on for whatever next episode comes after this. Or if you have any other ideas in terms of if you have any disagreements with anything I'm talking about, we can have a civil conversation. I always appreciate a civil conversation because let me describe something. Some of you may know that I do run another YouTube channel, and getting into that's not really the important part. But the important part is there's definitely a line where criticism becomes not criticism and it's just hate. There's a lot of masking done by people because I get it. It's easy to do. You're anonymous. There is no repercussion. You're able to say what you're thinking inside without any filtering. But to be honest, sometimes we need to practice self-control, self-discipline, and making sure that we understand that when we're criticizing somebody on the internet, we're criticizing a human. We're criticizing somebody who has put in a lot of effort and work into what they're doing. And if you think there's something that they could work on, keep in mind the amount of work that might have led to that part anyway. So, for example, in my channel, I've worked on projects for 2 to 3 hours and or longer projects, but and I've put in a lot of work and I've been happy with the results. But yeah, there's always stuff like in presentation or the way I edit stuff that could be changed. Maybe I didn't notice something before, and I'm always happy to receive criticism. But we have to remember that at the end of the day, we are fans, right? I mean, I watch a ton of YouTube. We're fans of people, and a way to do a healthy amount of critique. And it's really the way you word it. And that's what I'll say. Because otherwise, I try to roll with what I get and maybe try to spin it. But at the end of the day, I'm a human, and nobody, I think, likes to receive hateful comments. And now, let's get into the true crime story of the day. Today we're doing a true crime story. I think what I'm gonna do is probably go back and forth between true crime and creepy supernatural stories. That way it keeps it kind of different every single episode, and I like doing both. And usually these type of stories take up a lot of time, which is why I wouldn't do one of each every single episode. That'd be a little too much. Plus, they require a little bit of more research. So yeah, no, we're gonna be talking about the Jack family and their disappearance. It is a case that is baffling, mysterious. It has everything that is intriguing to me. And before we get into that story, if we want to research this ourselves, we could always type in the Jack family disappearance. Otherwise, I might post a link or two on YouTube of a couple of sources. Guys, I am I there's only so much fact checking I could do. A couple of sources are very trustworthy. Some is like Wikipedia. You know how Wikipedia is. Even though it's become a lot more trustworthy ever since there's been a lot more linking to sources. The Jack family disappearance. This all started back in the summer of 1989. It has been about 36 years, and this case is still open. There hasn't been much development, which is crazy, but there might be some other factors that have been causing this lack of progression in the case, and we'll get into them. But what exactly happened? What is this tale about? Well, we'll have to talk about the individuals themselves, right, to begin with. Now, Doreen and Ronald Jack were both two 26-year-olds who had two kids, a boy named Russell, who's 9 years old, and a boy named Ryan, who's 4 years old. And something a little bit more about this family is they were part of the Chesletta Carrier Nation, an indigenous group. And this might actually be an important factor into why there was just not enough investigation or enough thorough investigation. And we'll explore more in terms of what exactly that would mean. But let's get right into this tale. Now that we know the family, let's get right into exactly what happened here. Well, this story, we have to figure out what kind of led up to this situation in the first place. And that's the fact that Ronnie, we'll call him Ronnie because a lot of people called him Ronnie was in very dire times at this point in life. Financially, he had just lost his job, so we could say they were definitely in desperate need of money. And that's going to be an important reason because on Tuesday, August 1st of 1989, he would go to a local pub where he would meet a mysterious man. And this mysterious man offered him something that he was in desperate need of, which we just mentioned, money. He was offered a job, not only for him, but also his wife. And this was at the moment or at the time when he needed it the most. On top of that, this mysterious man even mentioned that this workplace was going to have daycare. Yes, they was going to be able to take his children and have be able to have somebody take care of him. Now, this mysterious man, which we've never been able to identify, is described to have been a Caucasian man, about 6 feet to even 6'6", which is very tall guy. Although tallness wouldn't be playing a part here. But after the conversation, this man had agreed to go pick them up the next morning. And now Ronnie didn't have a vehicle, which is why he offered to ride. And when he got home, he did make a phone call to his mom and left a very chilling message and gave her a very chilling request. He had told his mom that if by chance she had not heard from him, to go looking for him. And that goes to show something, that at the very least he was very much aware of how suspicious of an offer this was. But again, because they were in such desperate needs of money, they would still want to go through with it. And now in the early morning, we're talking about 1 to 2 a.m., this mysterious pickup truck was seen at their house, picking them up, and they would not be heard of again. Now, after a couple of weeks not being able to contact the family, Ronnie's mom filed a missing persons report. Now, I will say, a couple of weeks is probably a lot, but we do have to also remember that Ronnie had told his mom that this job would be somewhere between 5 to 10 days, which means if she had waited 2 weeks, it's roughly around the timeline that was given. Although I would have thought maybe not having received any phone calls there, but then again, chances were maybe there would not be any signal because this position that supposedly was offered to them was at a logging camp near Cluclos Lake. I don't even know if I pronounced that right. It's a lake in British Columbia, Canada. Now, this situation, like I said, desperate need of money means very much desperate choices. And we have to remember, at this point, they were so in dire of money that Doreen was reportedly stealing medicine for her children. And keep in mind, this is reportedly. Um, Wikipedia says this is actual something that happened, but you know how it is. And the dad was apparently in a lot of debt as well. So again, that goes to kind of show the desperate dire needs. But this also could have fueled some conspiracy theories later on as well, in terms of like what could have happened to them. Now let's talk a little bit about the investigation. What exactly happened after the report was filed? Now the first thing the police would do is they would go to their house, the house that was being rented by the Jack family. They would check to see if there was anything kind of strange, but there they found pretty much everything normal, nothing really unusual. And now, going back to the fact that the Jack family was indigenous, well, a couple of family members, including Ronnie's mom, had said to the media that initially there wasn't much support for their search because of their status as indigenous. And to make matters worse, about a month after their disappearance, the police mistakenly put them as found, which briefly stopped the whole search and investigation, which only goes to say like how much time was wasted. I don't know how long the pause was, but any amount of time not used for the search, because at this point, it's a month after the disappearance. It had been what could have been potentially about 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, probably closer to the 2 week mark, right? When they were reported missing. We're talking about potentially 2 weeks into their investigation, it being called off for we don't know how long, but it's one of the most crucial times. Yeah, so I don't know if the investigation really was stalled or if there was some intent in not getting things done as quick because of the fact that they were indigenous, but it at the time, and no, even up to that point, a lot of women, especially indigenous women, were going missing. Not to connect these two things together, but there's definitely support for that possibility. And what exactly ended up happening with this investigation? Well, the case remains open. A couple years after, about 7 years later, the police department would receive an anonymous call claiming that the Jack family's bodies were buried near a certain area. Police weren't able to catch which exactly lake was said in the call. They ended up pleading with the public, pleading with the man who had called anonymously, hoping, praying that he would call again because they needed more information for this. Nothing came of it though, unfortunately. I believe that it was probably a prank call, as sickening as that might be, because there are people here who selfishly would do that for their own entertainment, not taking into account how much pain that would cause the family of the victims. And what can we really take away from this whole case in the first place? Well, they could definitely take into place, and keep in mind this was 1889, so it's not modern day, but honestly, it goes to show how scary and dangerous it can be out there, especially for people who are in a very vulnerable position. Even potentially for people who might be a group a community that maybe is overlooked more often than not, or doesn't get the attention or recognition that they deserve when something goes wrong. And it's a potential subject to get into for sure, but it's nonetheless, it's terrible and it's sucky and it's so mysterious because we don't have a lot of information. We know they left the day September 2nd. We know why they left. We have an idea because Ronnie had made the phone call. He called his brother and he's called his mom, but we have no idea who this mysterious man is. We don't know if this whole thing was a ploy. We don't know a lot, and there's so many more factors. Their desperate money situation could have also led to perhaps trying to escape or trying to run away. But again, speculation, and there's nothing proving or suggesting that that was the case. It's just nothing more than possible conspiracies. It's scary. A whole family disappearing. It's crazy. The fact that the case is open and they didn't get anywhere, even if it was 1989, 36 years ago, it still doesn't make any sense how it hasn't developed or hasn't we haven't heard much. So I'll definitely be putting this on the list of cases to keep up to date. I'll make a list. Anything we cover, open cases, I'm going to keep track of for any new updates. And when we get an update, I will mention it. Now, of course, if you guys want to know more about the Jack family disappearance, I definitely didn't. I definitely skipped a lot of the details purposefully for the to shorten it for this podcast, but it is probably a case that could very much be deep dived. I won't be doing that, but I definitely recommend you go look it up to see more information, get more information on it, find out more things. If you're in that area, or if you by chance are watching this and have information, obviously call the police, please. Give them that information. Now, let's go ahead and change things up a little bit. I want to get into another personal story of mine. Get more into exactly who I am, my background, and yeah, the more you know about me, the more personal you feel with the podcast, and that's always good because it just, it'll make you more likely to tune in every time. So that always helps out. But otherwise, yeah, no, it's better when you get to know the host, right? So yeah, and I thought I'd get into an embarrassing story. It's both embarrassing and at the same time cringe. It's cringe looking back at it now. It's a moment I'm not very proud of to relive, but at the same time, it's a good learning experience and it's interesting. So let me rewind time a little bit and let's go back to high school for me. It was about 9 years ago for me, I think. And that's not even true. It's been about 8 years plus three. So, wow. Wow, that's mind blowing. But about 11 years ago, right? Let's go back to high school 11 years ago. I was in a class, a college level class, and it was a group of folks I thought I was close with. I was at the time potentially close with. Obviously, with time that changed, but otherwise, I was young, naive. I really thought I was super mature. And I thought I was funny. I thought I was funny. And so there was a joke. It wasn't a joke, to be honest. At the time it was serious, but I always thought it was like, having fun, like he. But essentially there was somebody in my class that I was close to for a while, but she was really struggling coming to class, and it got to the point where she was missing a lot of days. And so I just remember, I don't know. I just remember her missing class and me saying something like, "You missed class, ha ha ha. You should be buying us lunch, like ha ha ha." And obviously I'm fake laughing right there because at the time I thought it was funny. I thought it was like deserved. I don't even know what I was thinking, to be honest. It's very cruel, but because she said yes, because she went with it, I was like, okay, no, I mean, sure, yeah, you're doing it. So then I wrote down a McDonald's order, passed it down to my friend next to me. He wrote down a McDonald's order, went down to the next person in line. They wrote down something. I don't know. They were going with it. And then it went down like two more people. And then things very much changed where all of a sudden I was getting like completely opposing views in terms of like what I was doing. Like they were 100% against it. In fact, they called it out. They called it out as very like cruel and like they wanted nothing to do with it. And I was like, what? Like what? It's just she was willing to do this and blah 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 and making up excuses why it was okay or whatever. But to be honest, it wasn't, and it was just really cringe. And it took me getting into a couple of other people who clearly were more mature than me. Me thinking I was the mature guy. No, I wasn't. They were obviously a lot more mature because they realized that this type of thing was just like not. Maybe it started out as like hilarious or not hilarious, but like a little joke. But to go to that extent and to continue this thing on and put this girl, and keep in mind, think about this girl who I considered a friend, right? She was struggling in her personal life and she was missing a lot of class, in which, by the way, I'm not going to reveal her name, although one day I might ask if she's willing to come onto the podcast. But this girl, turns out, was having issues in terms of feeling like she was often made fun of, or people thought that she was dumb, you know, classic blonde, all this kind of harassment and bullying in a way. And here I am making this whole thing about her owing people lunch, essentially only furthering that. So, yeah, I'm extremely embarrassed about that. And what what was supposed to be a pretty funny story, like of an embarrassing moment, ends up being kind of a pretty serious thing. It's just long gone, and I've feel like I've had closure with her. At the end of the day, she didn't consider it that big of a deal, but to me, I cringe. I cringe when I think about that moment. I think about who I was, and I think about just so many things I could change. And yeah, this ties back to the very beginning. We think we're really mature, we really do, but sometimes it's just about perspective. It's just getting a slight perspective, because once a couple of the other classmates pointed things out, changed my mind completely, like changed the way I was thinking for that day. So yeah, okay, that got a little too serious. It was supposed to be mostly lighthearted. It's not supposed to be like, it wasn't supposed to be like pure nonsense, but it was supposed to be a lighthearted story. And I hope you guys take away something from that. At the very least, take away this, make fun of me for that. Trust me, this was 11 years ago, and it was at a time, obviously, when we have the most growth. I was 14 years old, probably 14. So trust me, I've since been, I've been maturing, and I've grown a lot as a person. So that guy's just not me anymore. But that was me, and we could talk about our past selves and understand ourselves better that way. Now here's something. I'm not too sure how many of you guys are really into TikTok. Yeah, I am. Have been. I wouldn't say I'm a TikTok addict, but I like going through those TikTok. I like seeing trends on there, and I like seeing news on there. I like seeing cooking videos. There's all sorts of stuff I like on TikTok. I've always liked the algorithm, but the algorithm has changed. I don't know if many of you guys have noticed, but the algorithm has definitely changed after the TikTok ban went away. Right, that one day of TikTok ban, and we won't discuss really the TikTok ban itself. But after that day, the algorithm is just, it's not the same. It still hits you with the same content kind of, but it's not the same. Isn't. So, I thought I would give people some advice if you're a TikTok user. WorldTok. WorldTok is a search you could do where it brings up hashtags WorldTok. WorldTok, and there's Global Talk. WorldTok, Global Talk, both of those things. You type them in, specifically search for hashtags of that, and slowly redo your algorithm so it'll start giving you those type of videos. But essentially, And this, keep in mind, this is mostly going to be new for people in the U.S. So at the moment, I'm mostly going to be talking about to people in the U.S. because our algorithm is flawed, and you could tell because once you start doing the global talk, world talk, you start to get a lot of videos where you have people outside of the US talking. It's their content. You get a lot more content from people away from the US, which a lot of us were not getting before. And why do I think this is very interesting? Because it's you know, when you think of Americans, when you think about who we are or what a stereotype might be, right? One of the biggest ones is the fact that we think we're at the center of the world, that we think we are the most important, or that we don't really ever think about other countries or stuff like that. And there's a lot of truth to that. There is not 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 a lot of it is our fault necessarily, because things like TikTok purposely give us a lot more US content to us, like from US creators. We do see a lot more US things, and because of that, we start to think everything is US kind of, you know? And that's where World Talk and Global Talk comes in, because you get a lot more creators from outside the US. And that's when you start getting a lot of perspectives. What do people think of the US outside the country? What are we seen as? And this is important. It's important because it kind of controls our ego. As a whole, the US probably has the largest ego in the world. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to deny it at all. But I think our ego could definitely be kept in check for sure. On top of that, besides that, there's so much of the world we don't ever see, and so many lives of people. And you know what this really does is it ensures that we start to realize that other people from other countries are living lives very in a very similar way in terms of like the basics. They are going out and working jobs. They are out eating food. They are out taking care of their family. These are basic things that it's pretty common for everybody, but once we start to see them more, perspective just widens like I swear it didn't take very long before my mind just felt like I had a whole other part unlocked. I'm not trying to gas World Talk or Global Talk that much, but it really can be, and it will be for a lot of people, revolutionary. I'll tell you that much. So yeah, no, if you use TikTok, go ahead and do that. Let me know what type of videos you see. Let me know if you like that content. I'd be very curious to know your thoughts. And wow, just like that, we're pretty much at the very end. So again, listeners, thank you. Appreciate you guys. Let's finish off strong. Let's get to the my favorite part of the podcast. It's just such a good way to end it, in my opinion. So again, make sure you guys are liking the video. Please share the video too. Share the podcast if you're listening on Spotify, and one day soon to be Apple Podcasts. Then please again share this podcast. You're not going to be able to like or comment or anything, but share the podcast. That's the best thing you could do. Add it to playlists. That will help out in the algorithm at the end of the day. So shall we get into the "Am I the Asshole" segment? Okay, let's dive right in. And this story is called "Am I the Asshole for Refusing to Lend My Sister Money and Calling Her Choices Mistakes?" Let's get into it. So, my youngest sister tried to guilt trip me and my husband to lend our hard earned savings so that she and her husband can buy a van big enough to fit their 4 kids. She has never repaid any loan I gave her. I told her no, and that her terrible choices will not affect my life any longer. She and my mother got mad and think that family should help family. Am I the asshole? Nice, she gave us a little bit of a shortened version at the very beginning before she'll explain. That's good. That's very good. I do wish she added some of the very common extra bits of information, like describing herself and her age, but we'll hopefully get some more information soon, right? Okay. When I was 24 and 1 month from marrying my boyfriend of 3 years, I'm currently 33, I found out that I was pregnant. We had a mortgage on our backs and repairs to our new house still to be paid, but we were still ecstatic and we knew we could make it work. About 3 to 4 months later, my younger sister, Carla, then 17, announced that she was pregnant by her boyfriend of 6 months, Jake, a messy guy who dumped her when she refused to terminate. Our family rallied around her, and despite our less than stellar financial situation, we helped her set up a nursery, bought the baby clothes, and paid for her visits. Paid for her visits? Okay. Jake came back when my sister was 7 months along, claiming that he felt bad about leaving her and was ready to be a father. My sister welcomed him back with open arms and married him as soon as she turned 18, due to not wanting the baby to be born out of wedlock. My sister instead stayed married to Jake and they had 3 more kids. Our parents bought them a house big enough to fit them using all of their savings and taking up a mortgage. Jake got a job in a restaurant that he still has to this day, and they live off his small salary and whatever permission, I think they mean pension, whatever pension the state gives them off for the kids. So they're not exactly wealthy, and over the years we've lent her a bunch of money that she has never repaid. Now, lately, me and my boyfriend celebrated a savings milestone. We saved up enough to repay our mortgage, which, mind you, was not very big but still feels like a dream that we had enough to pay it in full. I told this to my mother in confidence, and she brought up the idea to lend the money to my sister who needed a bigger car for the kids. I told her Carla can save up like we did or take a mortgage. My mother seemed bothered, but let it go. That same night, Carla came over to our house with the excuse of needing out and brought up the savings, which I immediately said were going to the mortgage. I kid you not. She said, "Well, but the mortgage can wait. My kids can't. I need a new van or I can't go anywhere." Long story short, I told her that I wasn't going to give her our savings because she never pays back a cent. She insisted that I don't know how hard she had it because I only have one child, as if we don't only have one because kids are expensive. I told her that her financial strain is none of my business anymore, that I helped her plenty in the past, but her mistakes wouldn't affect our finances this time. At this point, my sister flipped and accused me of calling her kids mistakes, told me that I have it too easy because my in laws care about me and my daughter. Jake's parents don't like her and have no contact with the kids, then stormed off. My mother took her side pretty blatantly, telling me that Carla needs help and we were the only ones that she has. Me and my boyfriend stand firm in our decision, but can't help feel like calling her family a mistake was wrong. Oh wow, that was a very long story. So, shall we get into the details? Okay, so the author of this, it's her and her boyfriend. That's essentially who is wondering if they were assholes for what they did. Her sister got mad at them because she wouldn't lend them money. And on top of that, she also called essentially her choices a mistake. And her choices include having more kids. So I guess by technicality, she did call her children mistake. Now, besides the sister, the mom is also not happy with the situation. And she is wondering if she was wrong for refusing to lend her money and calling her choices mistakes. Well, she didn't really give a name, so I can only call her. I don't even know what to call her. She's a John Doe, essentially, but she's not, you know. Okay, let's break it down into two pieces because that's kind of how she phrased the question in the first place. Um, is her not lending the sister money, her being an asshole? And no, that is not. The reasoning is solid. She has in the past lent her money, and she's never been able to pay her back. And this is money lent, it's not money given. And she made it pretty clear that it was lent money. She has lended her sister money in the past. And when somebody has a track record of not paying you back, I think at some point it is okay to just say no. So that itself wouldn't make her an asshole. And that's considering the solid reasoning behind it. Okay, how about calling her choices mistakes? Well, if we were to take in exactly what she said that her mistakes will no longer affect them financially. Now, mistakes aren't often choices. You are working on a job, you screwed up, it was a mistake. It was not a choice to screw up. Thus, let's make sure that is clear. She called her mistakes, which, I'm not going to assume, but it's possible not all of them were choices. But she did call those mistakes. And she said that they have cost her in the past financially, and that this was not going to be the same case. Her sister did seem to then connect the dots, whether they were there or not, but then connected the dots to say basically that the sister called her children a mistake. And an argument can be made that she did exactly say that, because whether it's a choice or not a choice, things that she has had to lend her money for is what she means. And she has lended her money for things relating to her kids. So essentially calling her kids a financial mistake. Didn't exactly word it that way, but that is pretty much what it seems like she is saying. So it is an asshole thing to say that. It's one of those things where, as much as you might feel it or you might think it, you might be thinking that. You don't say it. You don't say it out loud. It is rude. It is rude. You would be an asshole thing to do. So now I'm very conflicted on the fact that we have one portion that I don't think is being an asshole at all, and then you have another portion that is an asshole thing to do. She went too far. She definitely went too far. The problem is she tied these two things together, but I don't think they necessarily should have been. Because I'm just curious, is the sister more mad about the fact that she said no to getting lended that money, or is she more mad about the fact that the sister essentially said, or her own sister said, that having, or her children were mistakes? We're gonna have to read a little bit in between the lines here, because of the trigger, the moment of like the moment things flipped, and even that's even how she worded it. But the moment things flipped seems to have been when she said her past mistakes were no longer going to affect her financially. Because we're going to say that that's the moment, or that's the exact final thing that caused this true anger, we're going to say that that's the more important thing to figure out. So because of this, I'm sorry, but you are the asshole. I still think you should stay firm and don't lend her the money. You have to stay strong. No, you just can't. Not at this point. If she had more information in terms of like, sometimes she does pay her back, then it's gonna be 50-50. There's definitely ways to both help her situation out and at the same time not necessarily have to cause this conflict. And I'm not going to get into that, but so yeah, stay firm. Don't lend her that money. Or if you do, that's totally fine. But nonetheless, I'm here to tell you that you are, in fact, an asshole, because it's one of those things where and I think she should know. She should know as a mom herself that when you get into children, there's lines you cannot cross. That's one. She crossed something. And because of that, she's an asshole. That segment is, am I the asshole? Not necessarily did I do the right thing. That's a moral debate, whether she did the wrong or right thing. I'm just here to tell her that she is, in fact, an asshole. So, yes, thank you for tuning in. for listening to my podcast. I appreciate it. I appreciate a lot of my close friends who listen to this podcast. I hope you're listening to the whole thing. If not, it's fine. But otherwise, thanks. Guys, make sure you share the podcast if you enjoyed it. Like if you're watching this on YouTube. Make sure you add this to playlists and also share the link if you're listening to Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It's not an Apple Podcast as of this recording, but I'm hoping it will be on there soon. But again, if you're watching on YouTube and you have any sort of suggestions, go ahead and let me know in the comments. Like always, I appreciate it. Let me know how I can improve this. I will take constructive criticism fine when it's constructive criticism. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on episode 5.